Do you think, Rory, that it's a sort of confession of failure to have to talk price in one's advertising? I mean, there's a wonderful exception, I suppose, Stella Artois, which reversed reassuringly expensive, is a witty way of talking price, absolutely in keeping with the history of that brand and its particular values. But normally, I think, as buyers, we prefer advertisements to be about a value proposition rather than the price proposition, don't we? Or isn't that true?
It's interesting. Yes, broadly speaking, you have to get the balance right, because undoubtedly that game theorist in the human brain sees those people who only ever do price advertising as desperate. And there is, if you think about it, an interesting thing, which is that in every judgment we make about a business, we've evolved fairly good instincts to try and effectively work out what kind of business that business is. And if you think about it very simply in game theory terms, there are two kinds of business. There's the business with a very short time horizon, which is, I'm desperate to keep going, I'm short of money, I need sales now, all my motivations are entirely short term. Yes. I'm not interested in repeat custom or the long term, I need business tomorrow. And that's effectively, a kind of short game business. And then there are long game businesses, which patently, a restaurant opens and it's planning to be the most popular restaurant in that town in 5 years' time with repeat custom, positive word of mouth. Now, a fair generalization is the second kind of business is much more trustworthy than the first kind. Yeah. Any business that is desperate or short term or doesn't really have any interest in posterity, okay, is going to be a pretty bad experience.
The question that we've started with was, price versus brand, and I think that's a distinction that we should move significantly beyond.
It's a bit of a false dichotomy.
It's a very false dichotomy, and I think that we're losing sight of all of the other things that ought to be said to answer questions, either directly asked or indirectly. We can give them answers to questions that they weren't asking, but that would drive either a curiosity or a retention to that product and service. And so looking at things like, reinforcing other people's utilization of a particular product or service, or reinforcing aspects of identity in terms of what this product or service conveys about you. Yes. These are the things that move away from just putting a brand out there and instead starting to reach deeper in more differentiated ways and allowing for some different voices and messages to come out. That let's get away from in very few cases, price is not the thing that people want. We're either trying to buy convenience or we're trying to buy a solution to a problem that we have. Price is but one of many factors. And so we should reserve those discussions of price for those rare occasions. And even then, it should be, yes, our price is very competitive, but here are these other attributes that you get with our price. So I think the spectrum of what we're appealing to ought to be considered much more with a refined lens on from the consumer perspective. So it's not just shouting who we are, but instead trying to take a look at these are the things that we think that you might be inquiring about, whether you are or not, and address that.
In a way, the test of strategy is whether your customers ever need to examine the price. The purpose of strategic differentiation of a business is that customers never need to be concerned about the price or never feel inclined to look at the price.
And that's also important if you look at the thing we talked about earlier, which is the order at which people choose from various attributes. Generally, when people use the price on a menu to decide what to buy, it's because you've done something wrong. In other words, you provided so little useful information on this menu that in order to make this decision, wine, of course, being a complete bullshit category. I know, it's a controversial view. Basically, nobody knows the first thing about wine. The difference between expensive and cheap wine is more or less negligible. Nobody knows what's going on, so everybody effectively uses price as the leading kind of signal of I haven't got a clue what I want here, so I'll have a
This
27
is benchmark
The one in the
theory. I'm
middle.
not going to buy the
The one in
cheapest,
the
or not
middle.
this,
Right.
somewhere in the
The
middle.
one in
It's
the middle.
slightly lower or slightly higher than half.
Now, and there's another problem category, of course, where that happens, which is interesting in economic terms, which is one of the reasons you get property booms is that people use price almost first. If you look at the design of property websites, the first thing people do is they put in a price. Now, what do you think about that? You don't do that. Nearly everybody, the reason you have a huge property boom and why this propensity happens, and I'm amazed that economists don't point this out more, okay, is what people do when they want to buy a house is they go along to the bank and say, how much will you lend me? They add that to how much they have, and they start looking for houses that cost exactly that amount. Now, if we did that when we bought a car, the whole car industry would have gone insane, wouldn't it? We would have all turned up in sort of Rolls-Royce Wraiths or something, you know, and the whole streets would be full of supercars. It would be insane. But in the property market, price is basically, nobody bothers looking at anything that's 25% cheaper than the amount of money they've got to spend. Now, that shows an extraordinary faith in the efficiency of the market, but it also explains a lot of effective market failure. And this is a really important argument because a lot of people say, look, the property prices are not a product of supply and demand. They're actually a product of how easy it is to borrow money. And so, interestingly, if you can frame, there may be a role for having a menu. There'll be certain people who come in who are cash constrained. They go, I have £4 to spend. Make it very easy for those people to spend exactly £4. By the way, because those people want to spend £4. They don't want to spend £3.50. They want to feel they can get a combination of items that actually, you know, fulfills their initial price. They're like property buyers in that sense. Okay, they want to spend up to their max. But there will be other people who, if you frame the choice differently, then the price will be a tertiary factor in actually deciding what to have.